Hello. So my name is Roya, and every video I post on here is so different. I don't really have a consistent formula or plan with my videos. But today, right now, I feel like talking about my family history, specifically my father. And the reason for me wanting to share this is because right now there is a lot happening in Iran. Now, right now there's a lot going on in my life. I'm also engaging in protesting where I am, which is not Iran. But I'm just feeling deeply called to share what I do know, which is my family history, especially my father. So, if you don't know, there's a religion called the Bahai Faith. The Bahai Faith was brought into this world by two prophets, the Bab and Baha'u'llah, I believe. It's been a while. And it started in Iran. It's a religion that is like extremely big on unity. Unity and equality are their biggest focuses. It's a very poetic religion. You know, a lot of my childhood, we just spent translating and interpreting the writings. And something we'd always say is like, there's no one way of interpreting. Like, there's guidelines, there's ways, there's people who have spent so long like reading the writings and have more understanding of how the writings were written, but ultimately it's something that our soul interprets individually. And so I feel like it's a very spiritual religion for me, very poetic one. Spirituality to me is like when you still have your own, like your soul is still able to interpret life the way it was created. And you're not just following a script or like one kind of perspective of what God is and what God is speaking to, but rather that your own soul is connected to God, and that is the ultimate relationship. It's not you and other humans dictating what you and God are communicating with each other. So so the religion is super based in unity and equality. Like, there's a lot about pilgrimage, which is in this context about not pilgrimage, pioneering. So bringing this religion to different parts of the world. Like, its goal is not to stay in Iran. It's not to become ethnically tied to Iran, because there's a lot of religions that, of course, like they're not like, oh, you must be of this particular ethnicity to be a part of this religion, but there is a lot of a specific ethnicity that's usually tied to each religion. And this religion, from what I see, is like about uniting all people, and it's not really about converting anyone. Like, they welcome people who are part of other religions, who have no religion, who are agnostic, who are atheists. Like, anyone is free to be a part of Baha'i gatherings. It's very down to earth and community oriented. We don't have churches. We just meet in the different houses of the Baha'is in our community, in our nearest surroundings. Anyways, I'm going so into this, but with my father, there's a lot of, basically, wind it back a little bit. There is a lot of oppression and violence that has been occurring since the religion was birthed in Iran. This is because the Muslim government, as we are now seeing, is extremely controlling and wants all the power. So when another religion comes in and is like, hey, you actually have the freedom to have your own rights as women. Like, the religion was also very strong about equality of the genders. And they're not necessarily saying, hey, women, take off your hijab, become Bahai. No. It's more so we all have the choice to live free. And if women want to wear the hijab, if that's what makes them feel most like themselves, most safe, then they have that right to choose that. And if there are women who do not want to wear the hijab, who want to dance, who want to express themselves the way that they want to, then they should be free to do that. And so that is what Baha'is were also protesting a lot, and still are protesting. And there's countless stories of Baha'i women who took off their hijab in protest and were murdered on the street. There are countless stories you can read about so many different martyrs, so many different Baha'i figures who gave up their life fighting for justice, not just fighting for the Baha'i faith, but fighting for justice. And that's because it's a very justice-based faith. And what's happening in Iran right now, of course, is not necessarily linked to the Baha'i faith, but I see a lot of similarities between what the people of Iran, what the women of Iran are fighting for, and what the Baha'is have been fighting for. And they are both experiencing very similar consequences, which is hidden murder. So my father left Iran when he was 17 because there is and was a lot of violence done to the Baha'i community there. When one particular night, there were 9 Baha'is, I believe, maybe more, who were murdered. And of course, no one was notified. They were just brought to the hospital, and someone there recognized who they were, who these dead bodies were, and started talking to other people in the community. And then families came and realized that their community members had passed. And my father was a part of the revolution there. He was a part of the group. And so his mother and him were very concerned for his safety at that point. And yeah, there's not a lot of knowledge or information around this. Like, one, because it is a minority. They are a minority in the first place. And then second, it's hidden. Like, a lot of, especially the murders that are happening now, they know how to hide it. There's also just like internalized prejudice amongst Iranians and Baha'is. So people who have internalized what the government has fed them about who Baha'is are and what they're really here about. It's kind of insane. There's many stories to read. I'm not gonna get into that because that would take like hours. But yeah, I think it's like extremely powerful to have read these stories growing up, and now also to be seeing these women who are putting their lives on the line right now. And I think not only should we be supporting them, but we should be learning from them. And we should be investigating all the different revolutions that have happened, that are happening right now, because like, this is our lives. This is like, our lives are not in the hands of our oppressors, they're in our hands. And if we can remember that, if we can remember how to hold ourselves and how to hold each other as a community, and to be able to recognize where things are going wrong, like in our countries and other countries, and do something to change it. I think a lot of resistance is needed, though. A lot of resistance is needed, and different tactics are needed. Like, it's not just, it's not like, depending on where you are, depending on what you're protesting and what you're revolting against, there's different ways, or like there's different places where you need to be hitting to really get the ball rolling, if you know what I mean. So like, yes, in Iran, women having freedom of expression, freedom over their bodies is extremely triggering to the powers that be there, because their power is dependent on the oppression of women, the oppression of their people, in that way. So they know like where to go. Like they know what is gonna hit these forces. But if we're looking at like where I am, which is in Canada, there, you know, as you can see, like there's a lot of freedom of expression, and people can more or less wear what they want. Obviously there's nuance to all of that, of course. But there's so many other things that are going really, really, really wrong here, that have gone really, really wrong here and have not been reprimanded, have not been changed, have not been addressed. And so doing that isn't really going to set off the government. The government doesn't give a fuck about our expression, right? So we have to see what our particular oppressive regime does get set off by. And there's a couple of things. One, money. For sure, money. I'm not gonna I don't know if I should get into all of this right now, because this video is supposed to be about Iran and my family. But I'm just saying, I'm kind of just linking all of this together because, yeah, I feel like the revolution needs to happen everywhere, because basically the way I see it, right, is like change is inevitable. Change is inevitable in big and small ways, in individual and in collective ways. And when we have people in charge who are making up the laws, right? That is what's happening. They are creating the laws, they are enforcing the laws using military, using police. So they are enforcing the laws they make with violence. They have access to like weapons. That's the other big thing. I don't want to sound like a fucking American here, because I don't believe in necessarily like, oh, let's have our own guns. No, because they're always going to overpower us when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I also just want to point out, like, the revolution is going to be fucking horrendous. Like, I feel like it already is. It already is. And in a way, being complacent, being compliant is a survival tactic. Like, it is extremely intelligent of us to not be revolting, because in a sense, we're experiencing less violence by doing so. The problem is it's actually not less violent. It's just like an exchange. It's like we're not experiencing a certain degree of violence in a certain way, but we're also experiencing a violence that's just more unnoticeable. And it's also like, who is being targeted of violence, right? So the people who are privileged don't actually have to experience the violence, but there's a lot of people who do experience violence, and that violence is sometimes, you know, a self-inflicted one, not a self-inflicted one, a self-internalized one. And what I mean by that is, like, when it comes to residential schools, I mean, yes, there's technically no residential schools happening right now, but the most recent one was in 1989 or 1998, which is extremely recent. And the thing with trauma like that is that it doesn't go away as soon as the school closes. And even when the school closes, the tactics, the violence that were in those schools are still existing. They're just not necessarily institutionalized to the same degree. But all of that is still internalized in the bodies of those who went to those schools and their children, and it is passed on. And so, yeah, we're seeing addiction, we're seeing homelessness, we're seeing disconnection from their lands. And so that is already a violence, an extreme violence that is still occurring. Well, I lost a bit of my train of thought for a moment there.